It was supposed to be all good after the trade deadline, but it was a rough week for the Metropolitans. The losing streak hit 7 games. Pete Alonso tied Darryl Strawberry's franchise home run record, but is this team actually built to win down the stretch? On this week's Straight Outta Flushing, I'm joined by New York Post Mets beat writer Mike Puma to find out if the Mets are contenders, pretenders, or just stuck in between. All right, Mets fans, this week we saw a bright spot in the midst of disappointment. Despite the team losing 7 games in a row, Pete Alonso hit home run number 252 on Saturday, tying Darryl Strawberry for the most career homers in Mets history. And he did it in just 963 games, 146 fewer than Strawberry needed. The blast came in the second inning against the Brewers on Saturday as Pete rocked a 1-2 pitch 413 feet over the wall, Alonso's 26th this season and his 4th home run in 8 games. The power seems to be returning at the right time. Now, Darryl Strawberry, a franchise legend, he texted his excitement to the Post. A simple "Congratulations, Pete. Let's go." After he heard the news. Manager Carlos Mendoza, he called it something special, but reminded us that this one is personal for Pete, not for the team just yet. And while the milestone is huge, the context stinks. It came amid a 7-game losing streak in which the bullpen collapsed late, defensive errors mounted, and the team has now lost 11 of his last 12 games. It's a jarring contrast. Personal greatness meets team slide. But here's the thing. Heroes earn their legacy in the embers of team pain. If Pete Alonso can tie the bar while the team stumbles, imagine what he could do when this team wakes up, if they wake up. Strawberry and Alonso now sharing the spotlight atop the home run ladder. But the next step, taking it all the way, that's what the rest of this season is for. Okay, it's time for Dugout Discussions, and this week we're diving deep into the state of the Mets. We're going to do that with New York Post Mets beat writer Mike Puma, and after a busy trade deadline and a brutal 8 losses in their last 9 games, the big question here is simple. Are the Mets contenders still, or are they just pretenders? We're going to talk offensive woes, rotation issues, bullpen adjustments, and who needs to step up if this team wants to win the NL East. So let's get into it with Mike Puma, who joins me now. Mike, how you doing, man?
Dexter, how are you?
I'm good. Better than the Mets. That's the thing I can say right now. Better than the Mets. And we both are there. And Mike, we are here in mid-August. This team is struggling. They are hovering around mediocrity. So what's your honest read? Are the Mets actually good, or have they been living in that pretender zone most of this season?
I think the thing you really have to be concerned about here is it's been a prolonged stretch now where they haven't been that good. We're going on 2 months now where they've really been nosediving here, and it's really been accentuated, obviously, over the last 2 weeks, losing 11 out of 12, and you look at where they are in the NL East. The Phillies are up by 5.5 games now. The wild card race is tightening, so there's a lot of reasons to be concerned right now. If you'd asked me a month ago, I might have said, well, they've been playing better lately, and it looks like they're righting the ship here. But based on what we've seen over this latest stretch, some real reason, I guess, to be concerned about what's going on.
A month ago, Mike, I was preaching patience with this team. They have time to turn things around. Maybe the hitting will come around. Pitching should start to get healthier, but that's not happening. We're not seeing that. You just talked about them against other teams in the National League. You were talking about the Phillies, who they're 5.5 games back. But if you stack this roster up against the other teams in the National League, right? The Brewers, who just swept them. You're talking about the Dodgers and the Phillies. What's the biggest gap that still exists between the Mets and those teams?
Yeah, I think the thing is, and we've seen, obviously, like the Dodgers have had issues with their starting rotation. The Phillies have a terrific starting rotate, but I think that, to me, it all comes down to the Mets have to start hitting here, and I kind of wrote about that at the All-Star break going into the second half. Was, hey, you're getting some pitchers back here, and this was before they even made the trades to fortify the bullpen. It's you got to get your guys going, whether it's Francisco Lindor and Nimmo was hitting well at that point, but he's gone into a tailspin here in the last couple of weeks, and Soto's been up and down, and uh, Alvarez came back, and it hasn't been great from him. So to me, it's that lineup. If you get that lineup going, you kind of put yourself in that conversation with a team like the Phillies, the Dodgers. We just saw Milwaukee for 3 days, and they have a very good bullpen and a solid lineup here. They're it's pretty amazing what they're putting together here in Milwaukee, and with the 9-game winning streak, the best team in baseball right now. So, uh, but no, to get back to what you were asking, it's really getting those guys hitting.
Yeah, it's about getting those guys hitting. That has not happened, especially the Fantastic Four. They have not been hitting, so hopefully that can turn around. Now, look, the Mets, they made moves at the deadline. We all looked at this, but since then, they've lost 8 out of 9 games. Do you see this more as bad timing since the deadline or a sign that the problems run deeper than the deadline additions can actually fix?
Yeah, probably it's probably a case of I think the problem's running a little bit deeper. Now, listen, David Stearns went out the deadline, really strengthened the bullpen, uh, got himself a center fielder in Cedric Mullins, who certainly an upgrade over playing Tyrone Taylor, who, as good as he is defensively, wasn't bringing anything to the equation offensively. But um, I think the guy they really wanted was Luis Robert Jr., and they couldn't uh, work out a deal with the White Sox there. And then the starting pitching. Uh, the starting pitching market never really materialized for anybody, but ideally the Mets would have been able to strike a deal there to get a difference maker in the rotation. Um, and that never happened. So, there were more holes heading to the trade deadline than David Stearns was able to fill. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that right here.
Yeah, we have. And look, there's some fans who wanted the Mets to get another bat. Not sure who that is. I agree. Luis Robert Jr. probably would have been more of an upgrade over Cedric Mullins, but you don't know what the market is. You don't know what teams are asking for, so it's a little bit hard to judge that. Now, speaking of David Stearns, he stood by his hitting coaches this week and pointed to their track record of getting it done. Do you think it's fair to keep the staff intact given how long these struggles have lingered with the Mets in terms of their production at the plate? And I will let this be known, Mike, I am not really a fan of firing hitting coaches, particularly mid-season, but do you think David Stern sticking with his guys here is the right move?
I think so because and Jeremy Barnes and Eric Chavez, the coaches are basically implementing uh, the system that's dictated to them by the front office. They're not going to go rogue and say, "Hey, we're just going to overhaul our approach here, guys." And it's told to them from above the way the way the front office wants things done, and I think they've stayed on that path. Uh, right now, it's not working, and David's and I'm with you. I'm not a fan of changing, you know, putting on the hitting coaches, changing coaches mid-season, whether that be pitching coach or hitting coach, and they're easy scapegoats. And I think the point of David Stern's meeting with the media in Milwaukee the other day was he wanted to get that point across that he still believes in the hitting coaches, and the bottom line is it's on the players here to turn it around.
Yeah, I completely agree, right? Players have agency. It's on them to turn it around and perform or execute. And if they don't, the results lie with them. But it's not just hitting. I agree with you, Mike. Hitting is a major problem here, right? The Mets have to be better there. But the rotation's lack of length, I feel like, is also a major issue, right? Third shortest average start length in team history this season we've seen in terms of the starters. Is it a health issue because the Mets have been banged up there in the starting rotation? Is it a performance issue, or is it something bigger with the way this team has been built, the roster has been constructed in terms of the pitchers? What do you see the issue with as far as the starters not being able to get length here in these games?
Yeah, and that's a hard question to answer. I was talking to pitching coach Jeremy Hefner about that just the other day, and some of it now, and they some of it for a couple of weeks was they were getting Sanga back and Manaea back, and they were attempting to, they were stretching him out, pitching in major league games there, and you understand that when the guys first come back, they're pitching a few innings and build. But now we're over a month into that, so that's not so much the issue here anymore, and just a lot of it is that these guys, and we saw it today with Sean Manaea, just not able to maneuver the middle of that lineup the second and third time through. And Manaea was at 87 pitches when he got removed today. Maybe Carlos Mendoza could have gone further with him, but at that point, there's guys on base, and you're trying to manage to the situation there. So, um, it's not a one size fits all answer kind of for that for the issue of the shortened start. Some of it is, yeah, guys just go out and aren't effective early on and have to get replaced, and then some of it gets into the realm of strategy. And we see a lot of we see heck, one of the teams that's uh, behind the two of the teams behind the Mets in innings pitched from starters are the Dodgers and Brewers. So
Mm-hmm.
they're obviously uh, finding a way to get it done with with shorter starts. But uh, at some point here, and Hefner acknowledges it, you're just going to burn out your bullpen if
Yep.
you're going to it every day in the fifth inning. And we the last two nights here we saw what happened because the Frankie Montas only gave him 3 innings behind the opener last night, and so you were you were going 5 innings with the bullpen yesterday, and then today was another 5 innings, and eventually the opponent's going to find the weak link, and um, the last two nights that happened to the Mets.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. There was a lot that you mentioned there. I was glad you mentioned the Dodgers and the Brewers. Obviously, it's teams who have not got a lot of length out of their starters, but their situational hitting is better, which goes back to your point that the hitting needs to be
Yeah.
better for this team, right? So that's the thing. Now, two guys you mentioned there, Mike, Sean Manaea, Kodai Senga. They were heading to the season supposed to be reliable innings guys. Do you think that either can still be that for the Mets down the stretch as they work their way back into this rotation?
Well, they're going to have to be, and Senga especially that I shouldn't say him especially because Manaea was so good for them last year, but uh, Senga was pitching very well for the team before he went on the injured list. That was in the middle of June. He pulled a hamstring, and at that point he was getting deep into games, and he was leading the major leagues. His ERA was under 1.5, and it's been a struggle for him since he's gotten back here. Um, Not so much that he's given up a lot of runs. He's still got a very good ERA, but he's thrown a lot of pitches. Um, and those two guys you mentioned, if they can't get to the point where they can count on six from Senga and Manaea, it's going to be trouble here for this final stretch.
Yeah, it feels like it will be problematic. So let me follow up and ask you this, Mike, because for teams that go far in the postseason, how important is it for those teams to have a innings eater or a workhorse on the team in that rotation? How important is that, and can the Mets go anywhere if they don't have that from either of those guys?
It's hard. It's tough. Now, listen, we saw the Dodgers win the World Series last year with kind of a makeshift rotation where they went to the bullpen a lot, and but that's also a team that had one heck of a lineup
Right.
that could kind of compensate a little bit for. So, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh yeah, it's they can't win the World Series if somebody doesn't step. It's just hard, difficult though.
Yeah, putting yourself behind the eight ball there, really tough. Now, I'm going to talk about this more later in the show, but we got to talk about Frankie Montas. Is it simply time to move on from him in the rotation? And if so, who should be the next man up?
Yeah, and that's a big question right now,
Yeah.
figuring out kind of what to do with Frankie Montas. They don't have much roster flexibility right now. As it is, they're sitting here trying to figure out what the heck to do with Paul Blackburn, who's been pitching down at AAA. And if they don't put him on the roster soon, they're going to have to DFA him. And I don't think that's something they want to do at this point, just exposing them if a starting pitcher gets injured. At the same time, you got two guys tearing it up at AAA and Nolan McLean and Brandon Sproat. And I think it'd be interesting to get a look at least one of them here. And you, you have to think they could give you better than what Frankie Montas has lately. So, at some point here, David Stearns is going to have to decide what to do with like Paul Blackburn and and the other thing is that say you were to DFA Blackburn and move Montas to the bullpen. Well, that moves now you have a entire pitching staff where you can't option anybody, and they like
Mm-hmm.
having that one spot where if they send out a guy to pitch multiple innings, that they can just send them back to the minors the next day, and you're not going to have that with Frankie Montas in the bullpen. So I think that weighs heavily into it right now is um, trying to piece it together with the roster.
So, Mike, when you look at what you just talked about with Montas, right, and you looked at the fact on Saturday that he only goes 3 innings, they had to use an opener for him. Do you look at his situation right now as he's sort of handcuffing the team, or particularly handcuffing Carlos Mendoza in what he can do with the flexibility of this rotation? Is he handcuffing? Is he hurting this team right now? Simply put, as that.
He's putting Mendoza in a tough spot. And listen, they signed Montas because he's got good stuff, and he does. We see it. We see the fastball that he throws mid 90s and his secondary stuff, but he's not getting the results right now, and the pitch count was an issue in his appearance on Saturday. He threw over 70 pitches in 3 innings, and that's not going to cut it. So yeah, I think they're in the process of trying to figure this out here. Is what do you do here? Do you stash him in the bullpen? Do you let him try and pitch his way out of it in the rotation? It, it it's a tough situation right now because if you put him in the bullpen, you risk him becoming a bigger liability maybe than he already is, and you're paying this guy 17 million this year, and then he's got a player option for next season, which if if he doesn't put up good numbers here, he's just going to opt in for next season, and you're
Yeah,
on the hook for 17 million. So
he's gonna pick that up. Yeah,
it's
I
kind
think
of
I
a
think so. It's a safe bet there, Mike. Safe bet. He's gonna
you're
pick that up.
you're just you're trying to figure out how to uh, how to navigate this short term where you're improving the rotation at the same time. You gotta look at the big picture with Montas too. So
Yeah, and listen, I know some Mets fans are going to be frustrated. They're going to say, hey, the team's trying to win. They should bring up Brandon Sproat. They should bring up Nolan McLean. I agree with what you said earlier. They can't be worse. They can't be worse. Let's talk a little bit about the bullpen here with the new additions. Ryan Helsley, Tyler Rogers, Gregory Soto. On paper, with those additions, this is a top tier pen, but we've already seen a few late inning leaks here, Mike. What's the biggest adjustment that those guys still need to make in order to fortify this bullpen? Or have they already been overworked in this short time here in the Mets uniform?
I think that's part of it too, is the amount of work they're getting here, and it was a rough weekend for Helsley. Uh, the Saturday night he had the pitch clock violation and gave up the 2-run homer on the next pitch, and today he gave up the tying run in the eighth inning, and uh, he was having a good season for St. Louis, not the year he was having last year though. So, maybe he's regressed a little bit. I don't know. With relievers, it's so tough to judge from year to year, kind of what you got. But Tyler Rogers has certainly looked good, and um, Diaz, Diaz just he hasn't. You look at Edwin Diaz. The thing that struck me was when he came in today. This was only his third appearance in 2 weeks. Um, he hasn't gotten a lot of work, and I just wonder if I know he stays loose in between appearances by throwing and in the bullpen, and because there was a point a couple of years ago where they felt they had to get Edwin Diaz into games every so often, regardless of the situation. And they've kind of moved on from that now, where if they go a long stretch without using him, they're okay with that. But I just wonder about that kind of effect where a guy doesn't pitch in a game for a long stretch. Today, he came in the ninth inning. He hadn't pitched since Monday, and um, he got out of the eighth inning and then gives up the game-winning homer in the ninth. But he's been so good, and I liked the Soto addition just to give him a second quality lefty. But you're right, it hasn't been the lights out force we thought we were going to see, and but it's also a small sample size.
Very small sample size. We got to keep that in mind too. And speaking of small sample size, also, despite hitting a home run on Sunday, Cedric Mullins is off to a slow start in Flushing. Is this just a small sample size in terms of that, or is it something the Mets need to worry about with the way he's looked at the plate thus far in a short time here in Queens?
Yeah, it's only been about a week and a half, and uh, he did hit the homer today. He had a couple of hits on Saturday. So you give that a little time. I think he's clearly an upgrade in center field, and that was a very solid addition at the trade deadline. Um, but yeah, maybe a month from now, we'll say, oh, you know, that slow start he got off to wasn't such an aberration. But to sit here right now, I think it's too early to say.
Yeah, too early to say. One thing that came, we were talking about this. This came in right as we were starting to record this. But the Mets, they're promoting four of their biggest prospects in the organization are coming up to AAA: Carson Bench, Jet Williams, Jonah Tong, and Ryan Clifford. I think people are going to look at that and say, Jonah Tong, okay, finally moving up. They saw how he was dominating down in AA. Mike, how big is this move for the Mets, especially with the way we've seen Sproat and McLean in terms of pitchers pitch well, but to see these guys come up, Does this tell you that maybe some of these guys, and I'll add Sproat McLean into that group, could be coming to the big soon?
Yeah, I don't know if we can read too much into it yet, but because clearly we were at the point where these guys had to get promoted,
Right.
regardless of what's going on at the big league level. So I think it's just a case of the natural ebb and flow here, and Tong is, let's face it, I don't think there's anything left for him to prove at Double A. He's one of the top pitchers in all the minor leagues right now. So um, that's going to be one heck of a rotation at Syracuse. You're going to have Tong and McLean and Sproat, and I don't think we're going to see. I don't think Tong is a candidate to come up and, based on my conversations with people in the organization, I don't think Tong is a candidate to come up and pitch for the Mets this year. But it'll be nice for him to get his feet wet at AAA. This is kind of the time last year that Brandon Sproat was dominating at Binghamton last year, and they brought him to to Syracuse. It was right about this time, and he had a little bit of a learning curve there, and because there was some wondering at that point whether he was a candidate to come up and pitch in the big leagues, and then he went to Syracuse, and it wasn't easy for him, and that kind of spilled over into the early part of this season. So, but those are good promotions, and the, the 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 future of the organization is still bright based on these prospects, especially the pitchers.
Yeah, got to be excited about that if you're a Mets fan. Last thing for me here, Mike. I think this is the big thing for all the Mets fans. If the Mets are going to turn this season around, because it doesn't look good right now, and who knows, even come back and win the NL East, what has to change right now? That's part one of the question. And then part two is who? Who has to lead that charge for the change to happen? So what is the change
Yeah,
and who has to lead that charge?
I think that the two things are kind of connected, and I'm going to go back to the lineup, and I'm going to, Francisco Lindor he doesn't wear the title of captain, but he's the de facto captain, and he's the guy who really sparked this team into the postseason and deep into the playoffs. Uh, Last year, he's got to play at that level again, and he's been too much of a non-factor here for too long. And Juan Soto's been kind of up and down, and the last few games he's certainly looked better at the plate. But I'm gonna put a lot of it on Lindor, because if he's producing and getting on base, Juan Soto's you know those solo homers he's hitting uh, are worth more, and they're two-run homers. Now, of course, you could say, well, if Lindor's on base, maybe Soto's not getting pitched to as much either. But the point is, Lindor at the top of the lineup is kind of the straw that stirs this whole thing.
Yeah, he's got to get it done. He's frustrated the other night in Milwaukee. We'll see if he can turn it around. The Mets will try to turn it around. Mike, the Mets fan base right now, they've got their finger on that panic button, or they've pushed it already, I might have to say. They're pushing the panic button. They want things to turn around. We will see if they can do that. Everyone, that is Mike Puma, Mets beat writer, with us here at the New York Post. Mike, appreciate you. We'll talk to you soon. All right, Mets fans, if the week's been a little bleak, don't worry. I got you. On Instagram, found some sunshine in my favorite place, Brooklyn. And no, it's not a totally different ball game. It's the Cyclones, their annual Elaine Bennis dance contest from Seinfeld Night. And this was an interesting one. You can see it right here. They turned Maimonides Park into the set of the Little Kicks. And trust me, it was spectacularly hilarious. Elaine style flailing done right. I mean, look, you got everything here. An attempt at a two-step at first base, wild arm circles, improvisational hip wiggles, or just people who think they can dance but clearly cannot. Think comedy gold meets minor league baseball. That's what you had right here. Now, the winner, she said that she was raised by Seinfeld and everything in her life led to this moment. That's commitment to craft. And honestly, she looked like she had been preparing for this moment her entire life. I believe her when she actually said that. Look, when your team loses 7 straight games, that kind of performance that we saw there at Mamami's Park, it's the kind of joy that Mets fans need right about now. So whether your heart's in Queens or Coney Island, remember, even in the Mets summer swoon, as bad as it's been, we still got Elaine dancing to lean on. And that, people, will always bring the laughs, even when you don't have the wins. The time has come, Mets fans. It is time to move on from Frankie Montas starting games this season. Saturday night in Milwaukee, Montas followed an opener with 3 so-so innings, 72 pitches, 3 hits, 2 walks, 3 runs, only 1 earned. And by the time the lineup was about to see him a second time, Carlos Mendoza, he had to go to the pen. And look, that's the problem. When your starters are giving you no length, your bullpen gets gassed. This isn't just a Montas issue. This is the 3rd shortest starter average length in Mets history. And the only 2 seasons worse, both in the last few years. Over the last 48 games, Mets starters have gone 6 innings just 7 times. All of those by David Peterson. 22 times they haven't even reached 5. Kodai Senga hasn't completed more than 5 innings since returning from the IL. Minaya, same story. Early high pitch counts, no efficiency. But Montas is the most galling because this isn't just a one-off. This is a pattern. And when you're masking his struggles with openers, you're playing bullpen roulette every 5 days. That's why it's time for a change. Brandon Sproat, he's been lights out lately. Nolan McLean, he is a strikeout machine. You want to limit bullpen wear and tear, right? So give one of these kids a shot. Let them take the ball and see if they can give you 6 innings of competence instead of 3 innings of damage control. David Stearns built a bullpen to dominate October, not to cover mayday calls in the 4th inning. If the Mets want to survive the dog days and play meaningful baseball in the fall, the Montas experiment just simply has to end. That's going to do it for this edition of Straight Outta Flushing. Special thanks to everybody who makes this show possible. My producer, Erica Block, associate producer, Nick Federico, editor, Eduardo Guerrero, and production assistant, Tommy Cohen. I'm Dexter Henry. We'll catch you next week, hopefully when the Mets get some wins on Straight Outta Flushing.